Welcome back. So a forensic report on the George building collapse has found misconduct and safety violations. 34 workers died when a five-storey apartment block caved in last May. The Human Settlements Minister Thembi Simelane joins us now for an update. But look at these images. You may remember them. The country watched on an absolute awe last year. And for days after that collapse, we watched disaster management and emergency services trying to pull out as many workers on that site as they possibly could. It was a painstaking few days that we watched. And now this forensic report is out. Minister, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Your use of words is very interesting. You say the loss of life in George was preventable. Preventable, Minister.
Oh yes, thank you very much and good evening to our viewers. The loss of life was truly preventable. Our forebears have determined regulations and guidelines that, amongst others, municipalities, entities like NHBRC, Department of Public Works, Department of Labour, enjoined in ensuring the Occupational Health and Safety Act are supposed to follow. And quite a number of breaches happened from the processes at the municipal level right to our own process, which we have conducted a forensic report and investigation on in relation to building compliance in as far as the Council of Human NHBRC is supposed to ensure that such undertakings are being made. For example, prior registration of any building, you need to be able to have fully set approved plans or building plans from a municipality in which the building will be occurring. And then there are processes of ensuring that assurances with regard to the technical expertise in relations to inspection, in relations to the quality of the people who are supposed to lead the project, both coming from internal our side in terms of NHBRC, but also in terms of the contractor who will be building at the registration level, is adhered to. This is not just done for the fun part of it. It's done to ensure that shortcomings that were experienced at George necessarily do not happen. So that is why I'm saying, had we adhered to our regulations in this value chain, we possibly would have averted the loss of life, but we would have discovered timeously, had our inspections been timeous according to the regulation as well, that something is amiss before even the building collapses.
Yeah. Help us understand, Minister, and this is for the everyday South African that may not understand, the jargon of what sort of, regulations and processes the builders were supposed to follow. Just what some of those steps were that were skipped. I know that there is an issue around inspection deadlines that were missed and conducted assessments that did not actually reflect what was going on in the project, if you can highlight that. And then there's the story of what actually are the special undertakings that a multi-story building needs to take for regulation.
Yes, this happens even when you are building your own house ordinarily. What happens, you need to have your plans formalized and approved by the municipality. The municipality will check whether your pipelines are correct, electronical and water and everything else, and hand over you as a contractor to NHBRC. NHBRC needs to take it further. Now it looks into the quality of the developer. Are you qualified in terms of experience and expertise to oversee the type of a building that you are supposed to build? Meaning there's technical assurance that needs to be given, but there's also financial assurances that goes with the building. So the first sign of a problem here is that the building commenced even before the final processes of the registration between the municipality and NHBRC. That's the first part. But the second part is the building firstly was registered as a single-story building, meaning it was not a multi-layer type of a building, which is more complex by its very own nature. And its financials are more than what was initially declared at NHBRC. And thirdly, because the assessment of the registration and enrollment of the developer were not followed to the letter, his expertise are not equal to the building that he was overseeing. And that is one of the big lapses. I mean, our geotechnical maps as well were also not aligned. Our inspection timetable was not followed. Instead of a 5-day turnaround time, in some instances we do 8 days, but even assess work which has not yet been undertaken. Meaning you are assessing a foundation, but you're already commenting on something which is even more than that, just to short circuit the process. And we can see the shortcomings, therefore, seeped into the system, because if you don't have proper registration, you don't have proper verifications of technical expertise, you jump all these critical steps, you don't inspect properly. What would you expect to have happened? The building collapsed and it killed 34 people. So now we're doing this in retrospect to say, where does our process start? When was this handed over by the municipality to us? Our data don't correspond and don't correlate. Already the bill was happening. And this is in front of the municipality. It's just a stone throw from the municipality. So somebody should have said, I'm seeing this building happening here, yet my processes are not finalized. But that did not happen. And again, on our side, we flouted our own very much procedures. And that is why we're carrying remedial actions with regard to disciplinary actions on the violations of the code and the guidelines at NHBRC, but also referring some of the glaring inconsistencies and cases where we feel our law enforcement agencies have referred the report to SAPS for criminal investigations, because people died. So we're eligible as government to ensure that we give an explanation of how did these people die, who neglected to do what, is he or she criminally liable for what he did or omitted to do.
I'd be keen to see where that goes, the criminal investigation. Minister, you mentioned that people died, and correct, 34 people died. We watched as their bodies were pulled out of the rubble, and one of the debates that the country was having at that time was whether or not these workers, number one, are even legally in the country, have the documentation to be in the country. And I think that perhaps that being an issue for Home Affairs to speak to, but as the Human Settlements Minister, surely you also have a perspective on what builders can and can't do in who they employ, and certainly ensuring that their very own employees are in the country legally. You've talked about how this investigation and this report shows that there was the use of unqualified workers as well.
Well, yes, it did indicate. Remember, in terms of the occupational health and safety as well, there's quite a number of role players. There's a role and a responsibility of built environment qualifications and authorities by public works. There's also Department of Labor, which looks into the labor matters, including the workers themselves. But the preliminary indication from the Department of Labor is that most of the employees were not registered and they were not in the country legally. And as a result, they can't even be compensated for the injuries and the loss that ultimately happened to those who lost their lives, because they were working as employees who are not registered. That is why it was a bit difficult in some instances to trace them. But it's not only about those who are deceased. Some lost their limbs, they are unable to work, they're disabled as it is, and they're still not registered. And the issue is that you can't do it retrospect, and therefore they miss the key assurance that the system needs to give if you register people appropriately, because if there is such a constructor would have paid a certain levy to the Department of Labor so that you as an employee could be reimbursed if such challenges do happen. So there were quite a number of vast irregularities that happen. Some, yes, are within the ambit of NHBRC. Some Department of Labor is dealing with. The Minister of Public Works will be dealing with the built environment regulations as we hand over our report. There's test of material that was used. Some was found to be solid. Some was found to be needing extra test and verification, and Public Works will be doing that to conclude all the work. But we cannot just jump to say these cases are culpable homicide. We don't know that. All what we know is that 34 people died with a host of people who got injured. SAPS and our legal instruments needs to come and take place and say a case that needs to be answered by our developer and our officials. Is it of culpable homicide or is it of attempted murder? We can arrive at that, but we need to all be accountable to the families of those who lost their loved ones, whether they were legal or not legal in the country. We owe an explanation to those families to say, this is how your loved one perished, and this is how the system will be better improved to ensure that none of such occurrences happen in future.
Yeah, Minister, just before I let you go, I think this is important. You've talked at great length about the role of the National Home Builders Registration Council, and one of the things that you did today, of course, was talk about the work that's necessary to restore trust in the council. I mean, how do we do that moving forward, and your priorities as we close things off?
I think the council generally and its employees, they're doing quite I mean, there's over 2,000 in the country, complex buildings that they are overseeing. And there has been a collapse in this one instance. One is too many, yes. But what does the Housing Consumer Bill, where the president assented to, it assists us in terms of ratification. But the council has already taken a deep dive after the collapse in ensuring that we ensure that everything countrywide that is registered under NHBRC for construction, we ensure that all the processes have been respected and has been adhered to, and put within our systems some peer review mechanisms, including external experts who assist us in the implementation of inspection to ensure that we learn from this incident while preventing others in future. And I think we're looking good from what the board has constantly been reporting in ensuring that things are brought back to normality, but we also excel in ensuring that we don't need to even have one incident that either does not kill people or worse, kill people.
Minister, an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Minister of Human Settlements there, Thembi Simelane.